Chapter 7. The hunt was on. Abner Brookings, Esquire, lawyer to the bright and powerful and gun fancier extraordinaire, strode through the yanga trees, a beautiful antique rifle cradled in his arms like a well-oiled baby. The sun of this world, a purplish, splotchy affair, was just topping a magnificent frieze of mountains in the distance, and the colours the rays made through the swirling mists against the leaves and vines and flowers and trees were spectacular. Brookings took a deep breath, tasting the sweet and sour life of this world, and again he felt the charge that the hunt always brought: total here-ness. How often, in the docket of some musty judge's quarters, or even in rich corporate boardrooms, did his mind wander? There-ness, he called the state. And he decided that human beings lived most of their lives in that quarter-conscious state. Some people woke themselves up through Zen meditation. For some, music rang their chimes. Others, well, the list was endless, from grab skiing to pogo licking. For Abner Brookings, though, it was the hunt. For him it was the prospect, as well as the act of killing something. Today, though, the sensation was particularly acute, for the something was the sort of beastie who could just as likely turn around and kill him. "What do you think, Ab?" said the woman, walking abreast of him. "Pretty good day. Think we're going to bag that Zangoid?" Petra Pitsky grinned and shifted her hold on the large and heavy 12-gauge shotgun. She was short and stocky, with big shoulders, and she liked heavy artillery. Pitsky was a lawyer in the same firm as Brookings, a little younger, and not quite the snappy dresser that dapper A.B. was. In fact, she looked a little like Jungle Jill in her single khakis. She was dark and gruffly friendly, in her Ruski sort of way, and a good gal to have a vodka martini with after nailing poor suckers in legal coffins. They'd gone hunting before, but never on this kind of extravagant planet, never for this kind of big game. Brookings could see his own excitement mirrored in the flushed cheeks and the stance of his partner. "I think we'd better bag that Zangoid, or we're going to have to buy drinks for the whole bar tonight." Petra grinned. "We did boast last night, didn't we? Like the drunk legal eagles we are. Well, it's not as though we haven't had any experience in this kind of sport. Ducks and squirrels, some deer, one mountain lion." Petra looked taken aback. "Not. They were alien, fearsome creatures." "The equivalent of the above." "Come on, Ab. Give us some credit." "What we've actually killed, Pitsky, isn't much." "The Sims, though. The Sims." "True, but virtual reality, in my humble opinion, is a term that should be changed to verisimilitude reality. I assure you it's not the same thing." "We'll see." "Right. After pointing that gun down the jaws of a charging Zangoid, I'm pretty sure we'll both have different views of this entire business. And goodness knows, on the plus side, it will be a bigger rush." There was a long pause, and Abner Brookings took the opportunity to gaze over the party, taking comfort in the numbers and the fact they had a couple of guides, looking competent and hearty as they surveyed with keen eyes the murmuring alien savannah. "You know," said Petra Pitsky, "maybe we should have taken along heavier armament." She looked down at her beautiful shotgun, with its elaborately carved handle and its beautiful metalwork. "Like a many-millimeter blaster or something." "Ah," said Brookings, "getting a slight bit of jitters, are we?" "Of course not. It's just that, well, from what those guys were saying about the particular Zangoid that was being let loose this morning, I don't know. Maybe the first time out here on Blio we should have been a little more cautious. A little less sporting, huh?" Brookings hefted his own rifle. "Look, these guns are part of our collections, right?" Petra nodded, looking a little pale. "We paid plenty of money for them, right?" "Oh, yes. So let's use them." Petra thought about that for a moment as the sun burned through the mist, and an exotic bird with rainbow plumage thrashed up out of the foliage. "That's the sort of game these things are suited for." He shook his head. "Man-killers? I don't know." Brookings grinned, showing his perfect teeth. Some of them were implants, and they were all personally attended to by an expert dentist at extraordinary price. However, Abner Brookings had learned that nothing befitted a good sharky lawyer like a flashy set of choppers. Petra, this isn't paddle tennis. This isn't nullgrav ball. We're here for the challenge. We're both gun collectors, right?" "Absolutely." "And a sport gun isn't truly a sport gun until it's been christened by the blood of a challenging kill." Petra cocked a civilized eyebrow. "So you say." I speak from a long tradition of gentlemen hunters. Believe me, there will be absolutely nothing like the feeling of composure, contentment, and satisfaction you'll feel in your old age when you sit down in your study with a snifter of cognac and view the trophies on your wall, right beside your tasteful gun collection. He coughed and shivered exquisitely at the very notion. He pointed over to the guides, two brawny extrafabs slightly bent under weaponry and power packs. Besides, should we run into trouble, we've got friends here with blasters. He pulled out a bit of Tartonian snuff and snorted it up his nostrils. People don't pay money they do for this expedition to get killed. They pay for the illusion of danger. Petra shook her head. I don't know. I'm feeling somebody squatting on my grave, doing something obscene. How amusing. It's called fear, my good friend. It's fresh and original and primal. And when you're through it, you'll go back to your normal humdrum, and then before you know it, be back for more. I just want to get through this now, and maybe later I can buy you a drink, pat you on your back, and tell you how right you were. They were an odd couple, Abner and Petra. When they did criminal law work for the corporation, their nicknames were Bad Cop, Bad Cop. When they did any other kind of work, they were called Shark and Sharkette. There were a whole raft of names they were called behind their backs. But in Brookings' opinion, when you were called nasty names as a lawyer, that just meant you were doing your job well. Abner Brookings was a full head taller than his compatriot in torts, and, blonde to boot, a handsome devil. He was 45 years old, although with his rejug treatments and his regular exercise and vitamin injections, he still looked a rigorous, though experienced, 27. There were those who whispered that Brookings sucked blood to stay young, and he would always air these statements to his office and colleagues with the addendum that if he indeed sucked blood, it was only metaphorical. And could you undo that collar a bit? I can't quite get at your jugular. He had a straight nose and a square chin. He almost looked prefab. Money had brought him good looks, and he had made little secret of that either, although he added that this way he didn't have to buy women. This was the one area of modesty in a generally arrogant and immodest individual, and he cherished it. He'd had a few wives here and there through his life, and a few children, whom he saw irregularly. Mostly now what he was an exciting and fulfilling life, and lots of money, beautiful women, adventure, a life, in his opinion, far beyond the dreams of lesser human beings. In truth, his allusion to paying for this expedition had been mere rhetoric, since there were actually professional matters to which the corporation had sent him here to attend. Business mixed with pleasure, so to speak. However, as true as that may have been, he was quite impressed with what had been done with this planet. As a hunter himself, when he'd heard about it, he'd been intrigued, but he'd had no idea of the true wonderland old man Evanston had concocted on this world, so far from the system that laws didn't matter. This made the lawyer in Brookings nervous, but the man, the hunter, it excited. Anything was possible. They walked through the warming day a little farther in silence. The other hunters in the party chattered. Brookings could smell their jitters. And no wonder. These weren't true hunters. Not even true amateurs. They were just rich wannabes who thought by plunking down cool credits they could put on some macho. Some stink of cojones. Ha! There were 10 of them, ranging from scrawny to obese. Some company people, mostly remoras, entrepreneurial hangers-on to corporations or the independent man himself, Livermore Everston. The man's dream, of course, was to make this world a businessman's rite of passage. All corporation flunkies, all free market sorts, anyone with a couple of million to rub together and make some money to burn, money to spare should they want to get away and blow apart some unlikely game. Chances were, when those Disneyland days came, it would be a cream puff planet, with no edge. Brookings would have to look for his thrills elsewhere. However, right now he'd get his kicks while he could. So Nicholson, he finally said, calling out to one of the prefabs, any sign of our guest of honour? Hank Nicholson turned and looked through heavy lids at the lawyer. You're Mr. Brookings. He lifted one of his brawny arms and indicated. I got a reading from about 500 k's ahead. The man's accent was gilded in Bronx. Brookings wasn't sure it was real. It was a pure tough guy accent, and maybe the man had trained his guide especially to talk in tough guy. Take the other hunt leader, Hans Bynes. Ja, wir have the Fairmont tracker on high. She's in our sights. Big teeth shone through a scowl in the Wiener Schnitzel face. A fake German accent, no doubt learned from old World War II films. Give me a break, thought Brookings. Then again, maybe it made the excitement and uncertainty more entertaining for the others. For Brookings, though, it was like being in a bad vert-reel adventure. Oh well, when the actual shooting started, real reality would take over. Good, asserted one of the newbies, a twitchy little geek in glitter-blue sunglasses and mousy moustache, name of Sherman something, and he drunk milk the night before at dinner. I can't wait for the action to start. You sound as though you're trying to convince yourself, friend, said Brookings, unable to resist the opening. Going to be nasty, I can just feel it, said Petra. I just hope we all coughed up the insurance premiums that were strongly suggested, particularly the mauling and lost limbs charge. That got some eyes bugging. Hey, goofball, said Hank. We don't need none of that now. Everybody's gonna be safe, long as they follow the rules. And rule number 9 is, keep your big mouth shut if your group head tells you to. Glare. And I'm telling you. Petra shook her head and laughed. She looked over to Brookings for backup, but the lawyer just gave her a, "This is your shit you just stepped in, colleague," look that he'd perfected with partners in court. Petra shut her mouth. After a while, Hans looked up from his machine-encumbered arm, a puzzled expression knit over his meaty face. Funny, I'm not getting anything on the motion sensors. Maybe the Zangoid is asleep? What, with the sun up? The thing had a good rest last night. Morning is its most active period. Maybe it's caught something and it's chowing down. Hans' tongue probed his cheek thoughtfully. Yeah, must be. His eyes, though, did not look sanguine. What do you think, Petra? Said Brookings drolly. Perhaps the fearsome critter has found a perch on a tree somewhere and is presently patiently waiting to feast on your liver. Petra smiled. No, on your brain, good buddy. It likes soft food. Brookings let off a hearty chuckle and slapped his colleague on the back. That's the spirit. Stupid jokes. Bonhomie, bonding. That's what makes this a hunting safari of some quality and note. With renewed vigour they advanced to the forefront of the party, following immediately behind the two leaders. The others in the group, though, did not look so reassured. In fact, the general consensus, if expressions were to be read, was that perhaps they should all just go back and play something lighter and less troublesome, like a few holes of golf. The Zangoid had been beacon marked. Hans and Hank followed their sensors and tracers into a large copse of tall trees, a denser part of jungle-like terrain. The smells were more pungent here, the rising damp steam more oppressive. They filled out into a small clearing. There was something in the middle of a clearing, and Brookings could see the digitals and dials glow excitedly. Hans pointed. Yeah, there. What's it doing? Just lying there, said Hans. Odd, said the other leader. Zangoids prefer to remain in the bush. You generally have to flush them out. What's it doing in the open? Maybe it's a retarded specimen, said Brookings. Both leaders flashed dirty looks at the lawyer. They were big and dominating enough that Brookings cringed a bit at their obvious displeasure. He'd have to be a little more discreet with his quips out here. He couldn't hide behind the robes of a judge, and these boys could kick his tail easy. Still, it gave him a little thrill to be so saucy with them, a part of the dare of this whole expedition. They approached the Zangoid. The beast was lying prone on the ground, on its back, quivering. Zangoids are generally feline in principle, with a lizardy head and hide and 6 limbs, 4 legs and 2 arms. Some called them snake centaurs because of their resemblance to creatures of Greek mythology. They were fearsome beasts with talons on mobile limbs, claws on their hands and sharp teeth in their head. They were most definitely carnivores, preferring their meat from the fresh, quivering and bloody encounter. Although they hunted in packs, a Zangoid on its own was a far more fearsome and dangerous beastie, which made it an ideal hunting animal. Thus it had been imported to Blior, and thus it was being used for preliminary safaris. The leaders had hunted lots of Zangoids before and knew their habits, making this a reasonably safe expedition, despite the obvious snarling viciousness of the things. However, Abner Brookings could tell from the expressions on Hank and Hans's face that lying down on its back in the middle of a clearing was not generally one of the Zangoid's known habits. "What's it doing?" piped one of the sub-amateurs. "Is it having some kind of attack?" asked another. Maybe it's sick. There were other suggestions, including calling it a day and going home. However, Hank put up his hand for silence. With his gun poked forward, he took a few steps closer to the creature. Brookings watched, his own safety off, as the Zangoid went through what appeared to be a series of seizures. Its wide eyes were rolled back in its head, and its splayed legs trembled spastically. "Look, there's something growing in its chest," whispered Petra. "Looks like a pulsing growth or something," added another hunter. "Shush," said Hans, with full Germanic sibilance. Brookings watched with interest and disappointment. There was plainly something wrong with the Zangoid, which, while interesting enough, meant that in all likelihood they weren't going to be able to hunt the thing. A bulge had indeed formed in the creature's lower chest, and it seemed to pulse, as though the Zangoid's heart was beating far too hard. The animal's mouth had opened and snapped closed, and it had bit off part of its tongue. Rich, red blood streamed down from its side. Every movement of the beast screamed its clear state of delirious agony. Its lizard eyes seemed expanded to the point of popping out of their sockets. It stank of blood and urine and feral fear. The whole atmosphere around it was changed with an electric precognition of terror and violence. Brookings could feel it thrumming through the very ground. It raised his hackles. He thrilled. He could tell that Petra felt it as well. The young, stocky woman looked on the verge of bolting and running. Brookings placed a comforting grip on her arm, staying her. Then he turned his attention back to the event at hand. "Stay back," cautioned Hans. "We don't have any idea what's happened." "Shit, man. The boss pays a lot of money for these things," said Hank. "He's gonna want to know just what went wrong with this one and—" "Jesus Christ!" cried one of the new women, with good reason. The chest was expanding again, this time not retracting, just growing like some fleshy, bony balloon. A bulbous, pus-like, veiny head formed at its peak, as though it was some kind of gigantic carbuncle in bad need of lancing. It burst. Blood spattered in all directions, a particularly large splatter falling and drenching Hank. But this was all peripheral to the main show, which Brookings watched with horrified fascination, rifle down and ready. Emerging from the hole came a crimson-drenched, worm-like creature the size of a hefty, muscled arm. "What the hell is that?" cried Petra. "Some kind of parasite, it would seem," said Brookings. "Some kind of creature on this world they don't know about? If so, it has an amazing gestation period if the beast was just let loose this morning." "Nein," said Hans. "The Zangoid was let loose several days ago, to adjust to the environment. Experiment." Both the hunter guides looked as though they were undecided about whether to try and capture the creature or just blast it. The creature didn't wait for their decision. It squiggled out of its host, clearly dead now, damaged tongue lolling, ribs spoked up like tombstones, and scurried for cover. "Quick!" cried Hans. "Hank, shoot it!" He raised his own blaster. Hank wiped off a layer of blood and raised his own weapon. Before either could twitch a trigger, however, something tore through the shrubbery. It was going almost too fast to see, but Brookings, who had excellent eyesight, made out the dim outline of some kind of boomerang-like device. It whooshed through the air. It sliced into the thick worm creature, cleanly lopping off its head. The worm thing writhed in death throes. The device that had killed it whisked back into the bushes, disappearing from sight. "What the hell?" said Hans. Brookings crouched, looking around. "It looks as though we're not the only ones hunting today. What do we do now?" "For right now, we just stay put and see what happens." The others, however, paid no heed to this advice. Two men broke and ran in the direction of which they'd come. "No, you idiots, wait!" cried Hans. "There could be danger, stay together!" Neither listened. They cut through the quickest way back to the savannah, to civilization. "Let 'em go, man," said Hank. "We got our own problems." "What's happening?" "I don't know. Those weird signals we've been getting. The tech boy's been saying that something weird's been going on for a while now. But the head honchos have just been forging on, you know? Turn on the cameras. We better get this down for posterity." "And posterior holes from the sound of it," said Brookings. "Camera's been on ever since I saw that thing," said Hans, backing away slightly, as though just in case something else was going to blow out of that chest cavity, or even the head maybe. Bad stuff. His blaster was coming up, and his eyes were easing back and forth, catching a wide arc of vision, feet apart, ready, a professional stance. "What do we do?" asked Petra. "I suggest we see how our guinea pigs do in their path, eh?" said Brookings. Stalking horses of their own making? Precisely. The stalking horses were galloping along, indeed at a rapid clip. However, they did not make it. Before they were halfway through the glade, immediately under a large palm-like tree, something shuddered in the foliage, and something black, something net-like, folded around them from beneath, hoisting them into an elastic gripped ride. They bounced in their tree prison only once, before other things rippled through the foliage. Spears. Simultaneously, these javelins transfixed the attempted escapees, one through the head, the other from shoulder through groin. Both men had just enough time to let off a yelping screech and wiggle a bit, but before the streams of blood started streaming out of them like beet juice through a colander. "Oh God, oh God, oh God!" cried one of the newbies. "Shit and damnation! This fucking tears it," said Hank. "This ain't supposed to be happening. Hank, stay in formation!" Ignoring his fellow hunter, the well-muscled man ran forward, spraying a huge plume of energy up into the treetops, from where the javelins had emerged. Defoliation on a massive scale. The leaves did not even have time to burst into flame. They were simply blown into carbon, along with many of the surrounding trees, leaving only blackened skeletons behind. Hank turned around, a satisfied smile broadening his lug's mug. "There, that should hold the bastards down a while, so we can see what the hell's going on. Hans, what are you showing on your sensors?" "Nothing." "Can't see anything up in the trees either," added Petra. "Hey, maybe we got whoever it was," said Hank. "I thought I saw something hopping from tree to tree up there," said a slender, bespectacled woman, who in Brookings' estimation wasn't quite as geeky as the others. "What, now?" "No, before." Hank shrugged. "I guess we're just going to have to sift through the ashes. What do you think, Hans? Some kind of assassination attempt on one of these worthies here with us?" "I don't know. And if you have reason to think somebody's after you?" "Maybe they were after Blake and Alvarez," suggested Petra. "Those guys, unlikely," added a jowly man named Gustafsson, profusely sweating. "May I, as a lawyer, remind you, gentlemen, that we are presently all on audio and visual, and doubtless this may be used in some sort of hearing?" said Brookings. "You can turn that off, buddy," said Hank. "There's no law out here but the man's." Brookings shrugged. "Sorry, guess I'm just on automatic." "What are we going to do? Take the bodies back with us?" said Hans. "I'm afraid I kind of blew them apart as well. We'll pick up the pieces then." "May I suggest that we pick up our own pieces and get out while the getting's good?" said Gustafsson. "We could send back an armoured vehicle to pour through the wreckage," said Hans. "I think that would be wise." "I just can't figure out what went on there," said Hans. "I really think we should leave that to the experts," said Hank. "We'll just get the data on this situation now and then we get the hell out of here." "Yeah, I'm working on it. "Christ, you rube, you're going to have to get a little closer than that to get anything." All this time, Abner Brookings had been growing increasingly nervous. Before, the prey had certainly been capable of turning back and biting, but that was all part of the fun. Before, this place had been alien and strange, but that had been the frosting on the cake. Fun stuff as well. Now, though. Now, with an armed and civilized menace mysteriously skulking about among the trees, things were profoundly altered into the truly unknown. Abner Brookings generally faced intelligent opponents in court, and those were not armed. Now he was in quite uncomfortable territory, and the threat to his mortality was not thrilling. It was unsettling on a deeper level than any he knew. "Perhaps you should be thinking about a higher calling, gentlemen?" "Yeah?" said Hank absently and brusquely as he made his way closer to the unharmed trees, holding out his sensors to get the best possible reading. "Like what?" "I'm talking about your charges. You're responsible for 12 lives here, 2 of which have been extinguished." Hank shrugged. "Look, Buster, you signed the agreement. Did you read the thing?" Brookings was a lawyer. Brookings read everything he signed. Only as a consultant of the corporation, he hadn't signed anything. This trip was free for him and was all included under the umbrella agreement with the corporation. "Well, what it says, Shylock, is you fucking pay your money, you fucking take your chances." Voices raised among the group. Voices that seemed to be in general disagreement with that sentiment. "Shit, fucking Sunday hunters." Hank shook his head sorrowfully and waded out into the unknown. He directed the sensors in a wide arc. He stopped in his tracks. Shit. Hans! What? There ain't just something out there. There's several somethings out there. Moving. And I can't see a goddamn one of them. Look, over there! Cried one of the Sunday hunters. Brookings followed the pointed finger. Yes, there looked like something fuzzy and displaced among the trees. Leaves shook, and a branch visibly bowed. Get your asses down here! Shouted Hank. He pointed his blaster up at the trees. Or I'm going to mow those trees down just like I did. There was only a brief flicker, a thunk and a tearing, a sharp intake of breath. The next things Brookings knew, Hank staggered, equipped with a new appendage. A javelin, just like the one that had killed the others, had almost magically appeared, transfixed in his chest, bloody barb sticking out of his side. Hank looked down at the spear. For a moment he tried to pull it out of his body, and then he keeled over, dead. Damn, Hans said. No other words of benediction for poor Hank's departing soul. He just ran forward, screaming, pouring out a blast of energy from his gun. For his trouble, he was rewarded with one of the boomerang devices. It sailed through the air, again seemingly out of nowhere, and cleanly sliced through most of his neck. The head whipped back on the remaining strands of skin and muscle. A fountain of blood whooshed up into the air. The blaster scorched the earth harmlessly under Hans's clenched fingers. Upside down, horrified and stunned eyes stared at the party for a moment, aware. And then the light died in them. The body toppled over, still twitching. A gout of fire churned up some more dirt, and then it was over. For Hans. A rush of adrenaline and panic suffused every cubic centimetre of Brookings' body. He looked down at his antique, expert rifle, and it seemed as useless as some stick. The stink of death was in the air, and Abner Brookings had no desire to add his own to the mix. He reached over with his rifle and tapped Petra on the shoulder. Yeah, I don't like the turn of events. Let's go. Maybe we should grab the blaster? Uh-huh. That's going to invite another attack. Let's see how fast you can run. Follow? So saying, he turned and started running back the way they'd come. The remaining hunters were mostly frozen, transfixed with terror. Their protectors, after all, had been killed, and they were effectively alone in the wild in a confrontation with an unknown enemy. Two of them began firing randomly into the brush. Mistake. Deep in the pit of his instinct for survival, Brookings knew this was a mistake. Exactly how, he had no idea. But there was something. He didn't dwell on the subject, he just ran on it, offering absolutely no resistance. Petra's footsteps and huffing sounded behind him. The woman was smart. Follow the lead of your betters, a practice that Brookings had always used personally. He was in good shape, a good runner, and he felt the chemicals of his fear charging through his muscles like well-oiled, high-octane pistons. The path back was beaten, and the other end was clear and free. If he could make it back there, Brookings had the feeling that he could make it. Behind him he heard the shrill sounds of shots and screams. The massacre he'd foreseen was in the offing. He put on a burst of speed. Behind him he heard the sound of a trip, the stutter of attempted renewal of balance, and the chuff of bushes swept aside by a fall. Brookings, give me a muffled yell. Brookings' natural inclination was just to keep on running. However, he sensed he was in an area of safety, for now. He could spare a few seconds, and boy, would Petra owe him. It was better than money. It was a power that Brookings actively cultivated. He stopped, went back to where his fallen colleague was lying on her stomach, struggling to get up. Come on, chum. Brookings reached down and pulled Petra up by her arm. No time for lying about. We've got to save our... He realised that the squelched screaming wasn't coming from the distance. It was coming from Petra. Affixed to her face was some sort of crab-like creature. Brookings could see the ridges of blood where it clung, like some hellish mask. Brookings let go and backed away. There was nothing he could do. Nothing. Abner Brookings was a man of quick, decisive powers, and he made a fast decision now. He was going to have to leave Petra to fend for herself. The sound of the dying filled his ears. He turned and ran for all he was worth.